Okay, good morning. So we are doing today Beis Amud Aleph. We are towards the bottom on Aleph and Beis. And yesterday we discussed a couple of things that we didn't have a chance to bake a little bit more. So one of them was that the Gemara had said that Amr le Rabbi Yehuda Ika Moistim B'Chaziri, that there was some sort of a death plague by the pigs. And the Gemara says the fact that there was by the pigs was enough to start fasting and start being concerned about it by the humans. So the Gemara says, "Ne'emak sav Rav Yehuda makam meshulachas." So the Gemara said maybe Rav Yehuda holds that the reason that you have to start being geyser a Taanit for human beings when there's some sort of a plague that's affecting the pigs is because he holds that this is an interspecies kind of a danger, that it could go away from that the plague or whatever exists by the pigs can jump into the humans. So the Gemara says, "Nem k'sav Rav Yehuda makim mishuleches mimin echad mishuleches mikol aminin." Maybe it could jump from the pig or from one species to another. So the Gemara says it's not a riot from here that he holds that. Lo shani chaziri didamin me'ayu libnei inshi, that pigs have a certain similarity in their intestines to humans. So if the plague was affecting pigs, then in the same way it could also affect humans. That was the Gemara. So we look at Tesis. All the Tesis in here on Chafal and base, right? They're like the Pirish, right? The version that we've been pointing out throughout Mesechus Tainus. So you look here in Tesis Pirish. Right? The insides, the intestines of a pig are similar to human. And therefore, we have to be afraid if it already is hurting the pigs, it could hurt the humans. Not because jump species, but because whatever the same problem is can affect humans because the pig is susceptible, the human will be susceptible. Then Tesis continues. It says, Mekan nira she'im yiyeh davar al evdei kechavim, that if there's going to be something that affects the Gayim, some sort of a disease, some sort of a plague that affects the Gayim, sheyesh lachosh, right, they have to be concerned about it by the Jews. You have to be worried about it if it affected the Gayim. You have to be worried about it by the Jews also. Yesh lasanais, and you have to fast over it. Over here, you see that they already ordered a fast on something that affected the pigs. Because they're having similar intestines to humans. And for sure, by the Goyim, that their insides, that their intestines are similar to Jews. So the reason I wanted to discuss this place is that this happens to be a favorite study of mine, which is the fact that there were and there are those that think that Goyim are fundamentally different than us. And I'm not talking about the certain Hasidic masters who think that they have different souls. I mean, in terms of those that say that they have different bodies. There are those who think that Goyim have different amount of teeth. None of this has, of course, any basis in reality. And I wanted to suggest that maybe Taisus over here suggesting that Kolshkin, that if there's a problem by the guy, some sort of disease that's affecting them, that we should also be concerned about it because they are very, very similar to Jews. So I wanted to say that that's maybe a Taisus L'Shitase. If you look at Taisus and Avodah Zarah, Taisus says that what do you call? It's this Gemara appears three times in Shas, I think, about Chava Gufayu. Gemara wants to know maybe Goyim have hotter bodies than Jews. Sorry, maybe Goyim do not have hot bodies like Jews. Why? Because they're not being dagen in mitzvahs, entire mitzvahs. Somebody says no, maybe they do because they eat shkatzim and vermasim, and that shkatzim and vermasim are Chava Gufayu. So the more it goes back and forth, the more it ends up for the teku. Be it as it may, this has a lot of practical implications. Some Sefer in a few places both there in Avodah Zarah Lamed Aleph, but also in other places, mentions that he bothered. How could it be that you're going to have a Jew go study medicine by a Gershon medical school? How's that going to help? Even if you want to say that's the closest you could get to understanding a body that's going to be close to a human being, but isn't it different? And isn't that difference potentially significantly relevant? In other words, what happens if it's Yom Kippur? Right, where you have a pikuach nefesh question, potentially being violating a law, a chiyuv kar, if somebody is b'sakon or not. Can a Goyish doctor be opining? Can a Jewish doctor who only knows about medicine from Goyish bodies be opining? So that's a practical way. What about neither question? He's working with Goyish women. Is he able to now opine what a Jewish woman is going to be like? So these are some of the questions that the Chassam Sofer points out. But if you look at Taisus over there in Avodah Zarah Lamed Aleph, Taisus brings down a few different approaches. But in the first approach that Taisus brings down in that Gemara, Taisus says that Simi Barashi was able to heal a non-Jewish person. He was able to work on healing a non-Jewish person because he would be able to figure out from there how to heal a Jewish person. And according to that answer of Taisus, it would seem that Taisus viewed the non-Jewish bodies is very similar to Jewish bodies, which would be very similar to what he said over here. As a practical matter, in the Shas Teshuvas Shlomo Kluger, when Shlomo Kluger writes in Even HaEzer Siman Ayin Beis, he says that it's actually better to go to a non-Jewish doctor, because all the Jewish doctors are maskilim. In his day and age in the 1800s, that made sense, and so therefore, he felt that going to a non-Jewish doctor, whatever their experience was far better than going to a Jewish one. The Aruch HaShulchan, who's writing a little bit later, now the end of the 1800s, early 1900s, he writes in Yardei Kuf Pei Zayin, Siman Tamaches, that he says that the reason you can trust non-Jewish doctors is Le Maramum Nasam. They're not going to ruin their profession, get a bad name. You know, I don't know what they had in those days. What's it called today? When you can go on the internet and give a bad review, you can go to what? Google, but they have something that's called like bad reviews, where you can give your reviews of a store or a business. So he says it'll be a very bad review if it's the davar asur l'gluye, so the doctor's afraid it'd be maram nasam. So therefore, you can go. Not want to lose his certificate. So therefore, you can go to a non-Jewish doctor. Maybe I do. Not the same way, a non-Jewish doctor. And then, what do you call it? The Shiomet Center Halacha, which is now the late 1900s, so it makes the argument that, of course, Lo Maram Nasim today, Badav Asur L'Guye, is even more prevalent because today we have, really good like MRI machines. We have really good uh, uh, abilities to look inside, take X-rays and things like that, where you're not going to be able to sort of fake what was there. So for sure, Lamarim Nasim would apply today even stronger. And so, since it's a davar sudul guye, there's no need to be concerned about going to a non-Jewish doctor. But fundamentally, what it's predicated on is that the bodies of a non-Jew and a Jew are exactly the same. They're not different in any way, which is as we know today. Okay. That was one thing I wanted to mention that we didn't have a chance to do yesterday. Second thing I wanted to mention that we didn't discuss yesterday is the Gemara told us right at the end, the last lines that we were doing was that Rav Nachman was, Rav Nachman was Gazer Tainus because there was some sort of a plague or whatever was in Eretz Yisrael. He was Gazer Tainus in Bavel. Because of something going on in Eretz Yisrael, he was Gazer in Bavel. If you remember, back on your Testament Aleph, I mentioned that there's a machlokes between the Rashi and the Rambam. The Mishnah had said to us that Al Elu Masrim B'chol Makom. What was the situations where you were doing the shofar, the tainus, whatever, in all places? Shidafa and Yeraka and Arba Chasil Chayera Cherev. Those are the reasons the Mishnah gave. Why? Because these are makam halachas. They're starting here, but they can end there. They can be very dangerous. So over there, the Mishnah were giving us an example. The example was that the Zakanim heard about Shidafan and Ashkelon, and they guzzled Taanit all over their cities in Eretz Yisrael. And they said that there's more mashra from here, like the Rambam. The Rambam says that in the same Medina, if there's a problem of these kinds of things in one part of the Medina, the whole Medina should fast. But Rashi had said that if it was in Aspamia, you would fast in Bava. Right? Aspamia is Spain. So you fast literally across Europe to Asia. I mean, that seems quite beyond the realm of normalcy. Now, that was from the Mishnah. But if you look at our Gemara over here, Rav Nachman is saying, Ika Meislam Marad Yisrael, there's a problem in the land of Israel. Gazer Tainisa, you should be Gazer Tainis in Bavel. Why be Gazer Tainis in Bavel? Because he had a Lashon, and Gvir like Shivcha like Kolshkein. If the master, the boss, is getting beaten, so isn't the Shivcha going to get it? That is to say, it doesn't seem to me that this is necessarily the same reason per se. In other words, in the Mishnah, the fear was a Makam Ma'alechas. The plague could spread. It starts over here and it could keep on going. So if the plague spread starts here and keeps on going, so then it makes sense to say why you are fasting in a few different places. It makes sense because it's a spreading plague. So you want to start davening now. But that is in relation to what? That is in relation to, one Medina, one area. But what Nachman is suggesting is it happened in Eretz Yisrael, which is a different Medina. Let's fast in Bavel, not because of Makam Alachas. It's a coach game. In other words, it's not only we're afraid that maybe it's going to spread. There's a coach game. If the Gevirta, if the boss is getting hurt, the Shif is not going to get hurt. It seems like it's a different reason, a stronger reason, the coach game. So perhaps this will be then a raya to Rashi, that it happens in one area. Again, Spain and Bavel are not Eretz Yisrael, those are both Shivchas, but maybe that's a right that you do more than outside the Medina. Now the Ram said you limit it to the Medina, but maybe it's a raya from here that you would do it even outside the Medina, because you see that Rav Nachman heard about something that happened in Eretz Yisrael, and he was going to do it even in Bavel. Okay, now we have to get moving. We have a new Gemara, so we are on Chaf Aleph on Beis, about 7 or 8 lines, so 9 lines from the bottom. Abaya Nahava, right? Abaya Nahava, meaning the Rashi explains Abaya. I'm sorry, not Abaya. Abba Nahava. He was he had a profession, doesn't maybe exist anymore. It was once a sort of like a doctor almost. He was a bloodletter. He used to make his dam. He used to take out blood. That was considered to be a way of helping people heal. I think today it is muskam that it doesn't help people heal. It actually hurts them. But they use leeches, all sorts of various things in order to be able to make his dam. But you make people very weak. And the hope was that in the sort of taking out of the blood, it would take out whatever vapors and viruses and whatever that was inside them. So Abaya Nahava, all right, he was a bloodletter. Also, Shalom Sifs the Rakia Kol Yomar. He used to get a hello from heaven every day. The Sift the Rakia is one of the 3 types of ways that we discussed in brachas, and is a reference to how Gan Eden is like. Right? How do you look at Gan Eden? Is Gan Eden a situation like we're going to have here at the end of Taanit? We're going to see at the very end of Taanit, where everybody's sitting around the Rebbeinu Shalom and saying that what do you call this? Is the Rebbeinu Shalom Zashem Kivinu Lo Nagil V'Nisvacha B'Shuasai, where everyone's singing, having kumsitzes. That's like one vision of the Rakia. Another vision is the Mesif to the Rakia, as the yeshiva, space madrash, and everyone's steiging away to standards. Right? In both of these cases, the question is, what are the women doing? But we'll leave that for another time. But the Gemara is opening up here by talking about the Mesif to the Rakia. So he gets hello from heaven. Abai gets a hello from heaven every Shabbos, every week. So not every day. The Rava Komal Yom Kippur. Rava gets a hello from heaven once a year. I am Kippur. Havik Achol Shadaita Dabai. Abai was very sad. Right? Chalish said that. Where did you find that the first time in recorded human history? By Cain and Hevel. Pasuk says that that Ve'el Hevel min Chasei Shah, Ve'el Cain min Chasei Lo Shah. Right? The Torah doesn't mince words. Cain's carbon is not answered. Ve'ichel Cain Ma'id. Ve'iplu Panav. He's very sad. He's very upset about it. The more says the very Africa Chol died the Dabaya. Abaya is very sad. Mishum da Abba Umna. Because of Abba Umna, he's very upset. Amrulay Le Motzes Levik Ovdei. You don't think I could do like him? Abba Umna, he's a great guy. I'm not a great guy. Umay have Uvda the Amda Umna. What was the great deed of Abba Umna that he was Zecha to some sort of a hello from heaven every day? They have Oven Milsa, because when he would be doing his work as the bloodletting, he would separate the man and the woman. Misle levusha the isbek karna the havas bezik yichusilta. I'm not exactly sure exactly how this looked, but he had some sort of a baguette that had holes in it that the woman would wear it in order to not expose themselves when he would do the bloodletting. I looked in the Jasper dictionary. It says that it would sort of he was able to attach the cup for the blood into the garment, and I don't know the whole thing. Fine. However, it was. You have a Asile Itza, have a Malbishla, when a woman would come to do the bloodletting, he would dress her in it. So you shouldn't have to look at it. Right? He had a place where you would pay the cash, the cash register where you would put in the money, but it wasn't like not a cash register. It was like, the after you get the car wash, the pail outside, you could throw in the dollar, or you're not throwing the dollar, no one's stopping you. So the Islay Shadi Bay, somebody who had the money, who put it in the pail. The less they loy. If somebody didn't have any money, he wouldn't be embarrassed. Yavis family, so Marabonon, when a rabbi would come to him for the bloodletting, he wouldn't take any money from them because they're Talmid Chachamim. Ubasa the Kohen, when the Talmid Chacham would get up, Yov Leipshidi he would give him money. I'm really Zil Bar go heal yourself, because remember, after they got up from the bloodline, they were very weak. So you're talking about unbelievable guys. Abba Umna, he was a bloodletter, but he was a big tzaddik. So that doesn't still explain to us why Abaya was Polish daita, why he was so sad. So I thought maybe we should put in a couple of Gemaras which talks about Abaya, about these kind of things. So the Gemara says in the end of Kedushin, the Gemara says in Kedushin Pei Aleph, that when they would come for the shear, men and the woman, so there was a fear that maybe there would be too much mingling. So the Gemara over there says in Kedushin Pei Aleph that Abaya Daya Gofa, Rava Daya Kana. Abai and Rava both would attempt to make the sheer tznius. So what they would do is they would separate the men and the woman. Abai would put barrels. Rava would put reeds. Basically, anyone who's trying to cross the barrier from one to the other side, it would make noise. People would rustle. It would alert everyone that somebody's trying to do something inappropriate. In other words, the short of it is that Abai was also concerned about tznius, not just Abba Omna. Abai was concerned about tznius, and he attempted on a large scale to ensure tznius. Secondly, right over there, that is the source. It says that's the source for how you have Bahab, because of the mingling that happened on the Yom Tevim. As it says over there, they tried to lower the mingling as much as possible. Yeah, the Rambam in Hasidah writes that he understands the fear of mingling is not by the shear. By him, the fear of the mingling is by the river, by the lake. Everyone's going to go there on Shpatziring on Yontif. He said you have to put caps by the lake, by the rivers, to make sure there's not too much mingling. Maybe it's this Friday Ashkenazi thing where they're hanging out. Yeah, it's a bit of a joke. Yeah. Okay. But that's one thing we see about Abaya, that Abaya was setting up a situation where he was attempting to promote tznius. Second is that the Gemara says in Shabbos Kuf Yotet, Abaya says tasily. It's a lesson we see many times in Shas. I deserve Kimtzimir good. Why? Because Abaya said whenever he would hear about Suva Merabbanan, that he finished a Masechta, that he's finishing some sort of a learning, he would make a big scene, make a Yom Tov Rabban, make a big Mishnah. That is to say, he helped to encourage learning about the Yom Kim Chachamim. In fact, the Gemara tells Mashani Yitches that Abaye was from Bnei Eli, and he really should have died young, but he died at 60. Why did he die at 60? Because he did not just Torah, he did Chesed. He did a lot of Chesed, Abaye. You have another Gemara in Sukkot Nun Beis, where Abaye was watching a couple, a man and woman who were not a couple. They were married to others, but they were taking a trip together. So Abaye decided to chaperone them to make sure they didn't come to any sin. You see, he tried to promote Shnias. He tries to promote Chachamim. He's literally living way past the age of cars because of his unbelievable mixture of Gemilas Chesed, not just Torah. And then add to it that the Torah of Abaye. He's one of the greatest of the Amiram, the greatest Torah scholars in Jewish history. And Abba Omna is getting away from the Mesivta Rukiya every day, and he only gets it once a week. This maybe can explain the Chalish Das of Abaye. The Gemara says that wasn't nearly enough for Abaye that he was suffering the Chalish Das. He wanted to understand what is so special about Abba Omna. So the Gemara says, Yom Echad Shadar Abaye Zugad Rabbanon Mivtike. Abaye sent a pair of rabbis to go check him out. So he sent a pair of rabbis to be like spies, to go understand what is so special about Abba Omna. So Ishvinu, V'achilnu, V'ashkinu. The Abba Omna, they go to his house, they take his hospitality, even though they're there on a nefarious mission. He doesn't know that. So he gives them to eat and drink. And he puts them to sleep on a woolen blankets, at night. He takes care of them. He does very nice with them. But Tzafra, in the morning, the rabbis took the blankets, whatever the mats that he had put out for them, they took them like it's theirs. The Kambu v'nafkul l'shuka, and then they went to the market. The Ashkechinu, and they found Abba Omna in the market. Amalei, the Shaim and Mar, Hechishavu. They asked Abba Omna, the height of chutzpah. They say, how much is this worth? Amalei haki v'haki. He said, whatever, $100. Amalei v'dil m'shavu tzvei. Right, maybe it's worth more. So Amalei b'haki shekil. He says, that's what I paid for these kind of things. Meaning, I'm not sure if he's saying that's what I paid for these ones that you're carrying. Well, that's what I paid for these kind of items in the past. But either way, he's saying to them that, I'm familiar with the price of this because I know what this is, and this is what I paid. So they say to him, we apologize. Well, what did you suspect us of that we took your blankets? So Amalei, Amina Pidin, should we make Rabbanim Vechsifu? I assume you probably have some sort of important Pidin Shuyim or something like this where you have to go and go save some people. And so I assume that's what you're going to do with the with the blankets. So I'm like Hashtan Eshkil Numar. They said, basically we don't have any Pidin Shuyim. We're actually here to test you. So here, take them back. So Amalahu, so Abba Umna says, Mehu Shaita Askatinu Medatoy L'Tzedakah, right? He says, I was ready to see dance from this. It's not mine. I was already decided on giving this to tzedakah, so just give it away. I'm not taking it back. This is the story of Abba Umna, and this is why he was zeicher to agree that he was zeicher to a hello from the shift of the Rukiya on a daily basis. Now, this story of Abba Umna is not merely telling us about his incredible chesed, which obviously is unbelievable, or his incredible caring for Talmidei Chacham, obviously unbelievable. But we also see from here the incredible ability to behave down like Adam Lakav Zachus, right? The famous Gemara, the Mishnah there in the beginning of Avos, right? Aleph, Mishnah above, the Mishnah tells us they have done, right? Called Adam Lakav Zachus. This is from Yeshua and Prachya, which himself, the more than the site that had some issues with that. Right, in terms of Yeshu, his students who came to apologize to him, and he was in the middle of saying Shema, and that's when he goes into the terrible thing where it says he becomes who he becomes because he didn't get forgiveness from his Rebbe. But he had come already a few times before that, and he had pushed him away. Yeah. So first should be done. Call Adam Lakavzikus. Not that there was a Kavzikus in that situation, but that is certainly a takeaway. Is to try to judge people as favorably as you can. What's the favorably over here? Is that he didn't get angry at the rabbis. I don't know. He assumed they must have good reason. This reminds me of the Gemara in Shabbos and Chav Zayin. The Gemara there in Shabbos tells us, Ma'aser there, an unbelievable story about the worker who was from the Galil, who wanted to go work for somebody in the south. And he worked for him for years. And when it was over, he asked him to be paid. So the master says, I'm sorry, I have no money. They have no money. Okay, maybe give me some sheep. I'll take the sheep, I'll sell the sheep. I don't have any sheep. And maybe you have some silk. I don't know. He goes through all the things in the house. He says he has nothing. So the person Tzibrochen, he worked there a whole bunch of years. But the master says he has nothing, Okay, so he goes to his house, he leaves. So on the way, he sees a cloud of dust. Eventually, the master with a whole caravan of stuff. He says, what's going on? He says, what do you call it? I came to pay your wages. He said, but you don't have anything. He says, no. Because I had a reason for why I said I had nothing. So tell me, what did you think when I said I had nothing? The person says, no, I thought this was the reason that you didn't have any money that was available, and maybe you were magdish, and maybe you made a shvu on this. He says, you were right about everything. You were right about everything. Because you were down in the Kaskos, you should be down in Kavod. Heaven should be judging you the Kaskos. Over here you have a situation where you have Abba Omna, not merely doing the Maisim Tevim that he did, which is unbelievable, but perhaps part of the reason, in other words, when Abai is Chalish Das, he heard of all the Ches, and Abai is doing Ches, and he heard about the worry about Snitz, and Abai is worry about all the stuff, helping him, Abai is helping him, all of that. But there's also another level when he goes to check him out. There's another next level. They test him. They don't just merely check out and report back. They test him. That comes back. That he's also incredible down the Kaskos, like an unbelievable level. And perhaps that was one of the things that allowed him to get the schus of having hello from heaven. Okay, Jati Gemara. Unbelievable line. The next line is having a cholsha daiti the Rava Mishum da Abaya. Abaya was very sad. He also had a chalisha dat because Abaya has gilui or has a masif the Rikia saying hello to him every week, and he only gets once a year in Yom Kippur. So Amrulay Mishtayach the Magnus Akula Krach. I said, stop, relax. Why? You, schus, is watching over the entire city. Again, the nice actually what that means. The Marsha says over here, maybe this has to do with the Gemara we had in Parak Haraya. I remember the Gemara there in Brachas and Vav that we had. Over there was a whole story about Barhedya. Remember with all the dreams. So Abaya would pay the Barhedya guy, the dream explainer. And so in paying the dream guy, so he would get explanations of the dreams. He would get serenis that were very nice. And Rava didn't pay. Rava refused to pay until later. In the end, Rava pays. But in the beginning, Rava didn't pay. And he got lots of terrible news and lots of terrible things happen. Maybe this would help come to explain the Bar Hedger story about the difference between Abai and Rava. But I'm not getting into that over here. But in the end, over there, the Gemara says, this is what the Marsha focuses on. Well, you could focus on the first parts of the story, but the Marsha focused on the last part of the story, where Rava, when he pays Barhedya, one of the things that he says to him, he says, "Oh, Abai is going to die, and you're going to be Malach. You're going to be the head, right?" And that's the famous story. He's married to the daughter of Rav Chisda's wife, and Abai's wife came in, a very beautiful woman. She's married to 3 men, and she asks to be given out wine because Abai died, and she was coming to Rava to be done. Yeah, so Marsha suggests maybe that's what it means. Because Magnus Takula Krach is watching over the whole city because of the fact that the whole yeshiva of Abai over there, the Gemara says, came to study by him. Remember, we had yesterday on the page, we had on Chafal from the base, we had the schus of Rav and the schus of Rav Huna. They were Megan on the whole cities, but that was seemingly after death. Here, Masha Rav is getting to this level even while he's alive. So again, the literal translation, Masha is not using the literal translation, maybe because he's afraid, he's bothered by the fact that over here it only happened after death. After, I don't know. All right. So we don't have any more explanation in the Gemara about Rava and his Chalisha Das. But one of the things I always love to point out from these kinds of Gemaras is the realness of Chazal. It was not embarrassing to the Gemara to point out the Chalisha Das of Abaya from what seemed like a simple blood letter. It was not embarrassing in the Gemara to point out the Chalisha Das that Rava had of Abaya. And because of the fact that we on Klaf on the base did the Rav Bar Papa, we said on the bottom of when he asked for the when Rava asked Rav Bar Papa to tell him over some of the amazing things about Rav Huna, so he said, "Amalei biankusa le'dechina b'sevusa dechina." So I made the argument to you, which I think is essentially pshat in the Gemara, is that's part of the Hani Mili Ma'al Yasa, that there was nothing to remember when he was young. He was a regular kid. But when he was older, he have a lot to say because he became so special to his work. Wasn't born with it. So, so you see throughout Shas, like you see in Tanakh, the very real stories. So I'll just share with you because I saw an article yesterday. There's a back and forth. There was an article in a by a guy named Dan Rabinowitz. I haven't spoken to him in a bunch of years, but I was friends with him once. And yeah. So he had a whole thing. He spends a lot of time in Vilna. He's a big expert there. He wrote a book about Vilna and the Matisyo Strashon Library. Very interesting. It's kind of the Rashash. I can't get into more detail now. I don't have time. But the Kitzur Maisa, he wrote that he was going through the library is lost. They tell the people to come in. Oh, they're coming. No, they're not coming. Something. So the library had 50,000 books, 100,000, like unbelievable amount of books, and it was mamish before, and the library survived all the way through World War II. The Nazis destroyed it. The kids there in the library, in the museum there in Vilna, they found the cards. They found cards of who would come and take the book. Among the things that they found was they found the Brisker Rav and his son. And this elicited a massive response. And the Ated Naman saying it's not true. Brisker Rav went to a library. There was men and women sitting there. Brisker went to the library and they had secular books. The Brisker went to the library and it said that he took out a book by I.L. Peretz. Nothing. Oh, impossible. So the Rabinowitz responded and said, I think it's very possible, because especially the book that he took out, which is called Freedom by Peretz, the whole thing is about the story of the Brisker Rav, Chaim Brisker, and a poor person, and showing that it's not only about Torah, it's also about Chesed, etc. So it would have been potentially very relevant to take out such a book. But B'kitzur Amaisa, the impetus or the drive to say that something was so impossible and to make such a big stink about it was, of course, the fact that it was an anathema. Imagine the Brisker Rav going to a library with his sons. The whole thing was, right. Be it as it may. So the Gemara. So we have to just finish over here. So the Gemara says an unbelievable story. The next story in the Gemara is as follows. Rav Breka Chazah have a shchiach b'shuka de ve'lefet. Rav Breka Chazah was in this shuk. He used to go there a lot. Have a shchiach al Kabei. Right, he's one of the few people in Shas where it mentions that it was normal for him to have Gili Eliyahu. Eliyahu came to him. So Amalei Ika b'Hai Shuka bar Amud Yomi. He's asked him, is there anybody in this shuk that's worthy of the next world? Amalei Loi. And Hakim Chazalu Gavad Avasim Nesani Uchmei. After a while, they saw somebody was walking around with black shoes. Again, that wasn't the appropriate way to do it. Well, he wasn't wearing tchelis. It's a proof that they used to wear tchelis in the times of the Amiram. So the Eliyahu Hanavi says to Rabbi Berkeh Chazor, this person is in fact going to be worthy of Olam Haba. So Rada Basra. So Mamish Rabbi Berkeh Chazor runs after him. Amalei my Uvdah. He says, "What do you do? What do you do?" Amalei Zila Idna of Salam. They can't talk to you. Come back tomorrow. Lamacha Amalei my Uvdah. So next day, ask him, "What do you do?" Amalei Zandukna Ana. He says, "I'm a prison guard." I make the men and women separate in the prison. And I put my bed in between to make sure that there's not going to be any preachers. When I see that the guy are setting their eyes on someone, so then I'm a sign and I do everything I can in order to be able to save her. There was some sort of naim marasa there. The Yava by Nachum and with the Nachum were putting on, designs on her. Shaklu derived the Chamra v'shadil le b'shipula v'amri distani. So I threw some sort of jugs of wine on her dress and said that she was in need. So Amal my time less lechute. So why don't you wear tchelas? Why are you not wearing? Why are you wearing the black shoes like the geisha shoes? So I'm like, I yam in the fikna b'nei enough, and he says, I live, my work, my whole job is by the guy. And I have, if they know I'm a Jew, I'm not gonna have the access that I have. This reminds us the more Meili Yudayin about Rabbi Reuben Esther Boyle, right, who was going and taking a geisha haircut, whatever the kinds of haircuts they had in those days. It was like a geisha haircut in order to be able to mingle among the guys, in order to be able to help the Jews. So if you have a Gazra Gezirta, Maidanal Hula Rabbanim, when I hear that there's a big Gezer coming against the Jews, I go and run to tell the rabbis. They wouldn't tell me or I wouldn't know about it if I looked like a Jew. And then the rabbis can go and try to be battle, ask for rachamim, pay him off, whatever, to try to avoid it. So that's the story of this guy. So my time I know my uvdach, and how come when I asked you what do you do yesterday, and I said come back today, but I can't talk today, come back tomorrow. Why did you tell me that? So I'm like, there was some sort of a gezerah that was passed that I was very concerned about. I mean, I have to go run to the rabbis to the boy Rachman, the mill, so they should go ask Rachamim for it. So I had no time to talk to you. And so he was still standing there in the market. He's still hanging out with them. Tells them that there's two people, Hanach Trey, Asi, that these are also going to be. Whereas the side says Hanach Trei Achi, there were two brothers. These guys are also Amalei Hanach Nami Bnei Alma Asin, and these are also people who are going to go to Al Mahaba. So Azbal Gabaya, he goes and runs over to them. Amalei Mayu Daifa, what do you guys do that you deserve Al Mahaba? Amalei Inish Baduchi Anan Mevadchin and Atzive. He says we're Batchanim, we're a Batchan, we're comedians, and what's our job is to make people who are sad happy. Inam Kichazin Beitrei. When I see two people, this like tigger about that. When we see people that are fighting among themselves, we try to make peace among them. So therefore, as a result, we deserve, or Aliyanav is saying these people deserve Alam Haba, not because they're major Tamen Chacham, but because they do chesed with other people, they attempt to help the Jewish people, etc., as much as they could. These are people who are deserving of Alam Haba. Of course, we know the Gemara tells us in Pesachim Nun the whole story there about the son of Shimon Levi when he has a near-death experience, he almost died, so he goes up, as it were, to heaven. And when he comes back down, Shimon Levi asks him. Obviously, this is not the same as the Gemara Ksubas Ayin Zayin, where Rav Shimon Levi himself went up to heaven. He stole the Malcham Moses' sword and jumped in. That this story had to have taken place beforehand. So the Gemara says that he asked him, "What do you see?" He says, "Olam hafak where you see the people who are lauded down here, up there. No. The people who are not appreciated down here, up there, they're majorly lauded." So we didn't necessarily know that these Bat Chanim getting a lot of praise, but they do. In heaven, they do. Let's just do one more Gemara very quickly. This is what we mentioned at the beginning of the day today, that in certain situations you have to be Masriya everywhere. What's the situation where you have to be warning everywhere? That's what the Mishnah said. Certain things that you have to, right? Because the Mishnah said they were makam halacha. If you're worried about some sort of a shidafah or a yerakon, that's even mekolshu, even on a tiny amount. Arba v'chasil. What about on the locusts? Near Eretz Yisrael, because the Mishnah said to us on shidafah and yerakon was the pi tanor. I don't know exactly what the opening of a tanor is in terms of size wise, but here the what he called the Gemara saying that Bikiva says b'choshu. That sounds like it's even less than a pitano. Arba v'chasil, by the grasshoppers, you have to be so worried. Near Eretz Yisrael, even if you only see one wing, in other words, very small amount You already have to start working on it. I'm gonna have to stop over here.